Welcome to Amazing Stories of Amazing Grace. I'm your host, Chester Stanley, and we're delighted to have in the studio Mrs. Dawn Brownhill. Dawn, welcome to Amazing Stories of Amazing Grace.
Thank you very much, Chester. I'm happy to be here today.
Very good, and we're happy for you to be here and to be able to share your story. We've shared before, and it's a fascinating journey, and I know it's going to be appreciated very much. Dawn, tell us about your origins, where you came from, etc.
When I was aged 7, my immediate family and I immigrated from South Africa to Australia. So I was born over there, and only my parents and my 3 siblings came to Australia, and we had no other relatives in the country. We had no friends. It was just us, and it took a while to settle in. And I felt isolated, and I felt lonely a lot, without any grandmas around the corner, cousins to play with, big family gatherings for Christmas and things like that. So it was different.
So Dawn, what was it like growing up? Let's share a little about growing up.
Okay. I was quite good at school in my primary school days and early high school. Got really good grades, but near the end of high school I started to slip a bit. I was distracted by boys, and also my parents' marriage was in trouble, and so that it didn't have a good influence on me. I'd also started to see that people around me, I became disturbed with the problem in my family. I began to see that other people that had the house and the car and the wife and the kids and the boat and the job, they were still unhappy. People were divorcing all around the place, and I saw that material things and this particular goal wasn't going to be enough to keep me happy. There needed to be something more in life.
So Dawn, as a young lady in upper high school, you're looking around, you're obviously a very thoughtful person, and you're looking around at those who seem to have happiness or whatever. So where did you go in your search for happiness? My
older siblings were involved in the counterculture and the hippie movement of the early 70s and late 60s, and they introduced me to some of their friends who were using drugs and Eastern mysticism to expand their minds, to develop their awareness, to explore their real selves. And it seemed very appealing to me because apart from the fact that they were young, but also just in terms of the literature that was there, they introduced me to books with titles like In Search of the Miraculous, and authors like Gurdjieff and Ouspensky, speakers Baba Ram Dass, and it just had a real draw because it tapped into more of a spiritual type of thing.
It was the whole culture at that time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Also to vegetarianism and just living more naturally. And about this time my parents divorced as well, and my younger sister, my mother and I moved to Queensland, but also from being a good student, I now actually had to repeat my senior year to be able to get a university entrance. And so when it was time for me to start university, I already felt that I had failed in my life for the goals that I'd set for myself.
Okay, right. So how did this affect you?
Well, even more, I threw myself into trying to be happy. I got my cues a lot from the media. The advertising, the movies, you look the right way, you wear the right clothes, you've got your boyfriend, you go to parties, drink the right brand of drink and smoke, and this is what's going to make you happy. I actually forced myself to start smoking because it was very nasty, and it was really not very pleasant, but I thought I needed to do it to be able to fit in, to look mature and adult. And so I started living for the weekends. Parties, was involved in the pub scene, I worked in a pub as well, and started to see the ugly side of alcohol and what it was doing to people, and that I became very disgusted by the degrading things, by the lack of morality that happened under the influence of alcohol, young girls being taken advantage of, people betraying their partners and their friends, and it just wasn't a pretty sight.
So, Dawn, I gather that you sound as if at that point in time you're pretty disillusioned with what you saw as being the norm in life?
I started to question what was right and wrong, even, because I knew, well, you shouldn't kill. What about adultery? And where was I getting my values? And I felt like, is it, if everyone else is doing it, is it okay, or is there actually something that's real and that's right and that's good? And I felt like I'd been a ship. I'd started out tied up at the wharf, but now I was out at sea in the storm, and there were big waves and there was nowhere to anchor, and I was just lost and adrift and confused.
Fascinating. So, this confusion, this interesting, challenging image you've got of being, this ship at sea. And so where did you turn to?
Well, I started to think, well, am I the only one that thinks like this? Maybe I'm the weird one and everyone else is normal. So I changed university courses a few times and ended up studying psychology, because I thought this is the science of the mind and of understanding and of people. And I thought this would be good. But I found that the lecturers seemed to not have it together either. There was no one that really had a grip on it. And also at this time, a very dear friend of mine who was also on the spiritual route, spiritual search I was on, almost my mentor, was in very deep problems.
Yeah, thanks, Dawn. It's a fascinating story. I'm sure you're enjoying Dawn's story. Stay right with us, and we'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Amazing Stories of Amazing Grace, and we're with Mrs. Dawn Brownhill. Dawn, before the break, you were sharing with us a friend who was likewise on a search for meaning in relation to life. Tell us the story. What did you help her, etc.?
Well, she was in deep trouble with her drug and her mind expansion experiences. And so I was looking for any avenue for help. I'd started to ask the lecturers at university, but I found that, or the ones in the psychology department, but I found that they really didn't have the answers, because psychology was a science and didn't really move over into the metaphysical realm much. Eventually I asked one lecturer who was up the front of class. He was one of my lecturers, and he seemed to be fairly credible, and something he said seemed to make me think that he may be more open to these spiritual or metaphysical things. So I started, I had troubles in my life too, but I thought hers were far greater, so I started to ask him for a way of understanding what was happening. And he started talking about this cosmic conflict between the powers of good and evil, this conflict between the designer, this conflict between the designer and the enemy, where one wanted our freedom and our best choices and for us to love him, and the other one ruled by slavery and suffering and by death. And so he started to elaborate on it a little bit more into slightly Christian terms, but basically said that there's no middle ground in this conflict. We all have to choose which side that we're going to be on, whether the side of the designer or of the enemy.
Fascinating. And did you find this helpful?
Well, first of all, I thought when he first mentioned Christ's name, I was just incredibly disappointed. So
he did mention Christ's name?
Eventually. But it took a while, because if he'd started out on it first up, I probably wouldn't have listened. I thought, oh no, not this one, what have I got myself into? And I'd burnt a Bible in my upper high school years. It was in my way of saying, this hasn't worked, it's not relevant, it just hasn't worked, it's caused a lot of problems.
So that was intentional?
That was intentional, and I turned away from God, and it was like he'd left me to my own devices for a little while. Okay, you make your own choices for a bit and see where it gets you. So I was really disappointed in what he said, but there was something also in what he's saying, I listened more. I didn't throw him out of my house because I was fairly respectful towards teachers and lecturers. So I just listened, and as he spoke, I was drawn more and more to it. And
fascinating.
He basically just repeated promises from the Bible, from God's Word. Promises like, whoever comes to me, I'll in no way cast out. As far as the east is from the west, so far I'll remove your transgressions from you. Come unto me, all you are weary and heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So this type of thing just gave me this, it touched a chord in me where I was just feeling really battered and weary and confused, but there seemed to be some form of promise for something else, for happiness, for something to come. And also I realised that I had done many things wrong too, but this man was saying, we don't have to change ourselves to come to God. We come as we are, and He does the changing.
Okay, fascinating. So he was obviously a Christian.
He was a Christian.
Yes. So I believe, Dawn, at about this time, looking back, you believe that, God did work a miracle in relation to you. So why don't you share that with us?
Okay. As I said before, I'd started smoking, so by this time I was...
Forced yourself to smoke.
Oh, yes. It gave me these shudders first up, and I could only have a few puffs, and I'd hand the cigarette on to a friend, but eventually I could get through one and then more. So I'd built up to about 40 cigarettes a day. And I'd picked up from movies and from some Catholic friends I had when I was a child that in order for God to listen to you, you've got to suffer. And I knew now I know this is totally wrong. It's not the way at all. But that was my thinking at the time, and I thought, all I've got to suffer about anymore is the withdrawals from giving up smoking. So I thought, this is all I've got to bargain with.
Yes,
so I did this deal with God. It was my first prayer, and I remember feeling really stupid and embarrassed. No one else was there, but I still blushed, and I just thought,
You're by yourself.
I was by myself,
yes.
and I don't know if I said it out loud, but I thought my first prayer to God, and I said, well, God, I'm going to give up smoking, and you do what you can to help my friend. And I thought, okay, now I've got to batten down and wait for all the withdrawals and the cravings and the cough and the mucus and all the other stuff that happens. But there was nothing, totally nothing, no desire, no coughs, anything. And the Lord worked a miracle in my life. He took me from 40 to 0, just like that. And it was, in thinking back, I just thought, this is a bit weird. But it's like the prodigal son. We start taking some steps towards God, and He comes a long way to help us.
Yeah, that's 40 cigarettes a day. That's amazing.
And it was painless, And I just praise Him for that.
Yes, very clearly, God was working miraculously at that stage. So, what did this lead to, Dawn?
Well, He actually is fairly cunning the way He works in our life, the Lord, because He'd taken away another very important crutch. So by this time, I was very disillusioned with my career, with events in the world. I mean, the headlines these days are pretty disheartening. They were in those days too. A lot of things I couldn't fix. I was feeling worthless in myself, and my relationship with the boyfriend I loved, just wasn't going well. So now I was actually on fairly shaky ground, and I was just, going down.
Yep, for sure. Where did that lead to? Did the lecturer talk to you at this point in time, or?
Yes, by this time I'd spoken to him twice, and what he was saying made sense. So he'd invited me to come and spend some time with him and his wife, and he just told me more and more, just kept repeating God's love, His promises, some plans for the future, and opening the Bible to me. So intellectually I'd accepted what he was saying, but still deep down, and I thought, this sounds good, it seems to be checking out, but deep down I just thought, I really hadn't surrendered yet.
Yes, okay. There was this unwillingness to take that final step. So, Dawn, what helped you? What surrounded you taking this final step towards God?
Well, I realised I was actually still on enemy territory, and I'd been into the occult a bit, and I had some dark books, you know, on spells and fortune telling and stuff at home. Right. My father had been a Freemason, and he, ever since childhood, I used to wake up with these dark presences in the room with me, and I couldn't understand them. But now I woke up again after having contact with this Christian man and his wife. I woke up again, and there was this presence in the room with me, and I knew for the first time I could identify it as Satan or from Satan. And I knew I was going to die. Okay. I couldn't fight him myself.
And this was an evil influence, you're aware of that.
Yes.
Dawn, we'll pause right there. We need to go to a break. I'm sure you're enjoying this enthralling journey of Dawn's, and stay right with us, and we'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Amazing Stories of Amazing Grace, and we're with Mrs. Dawn Brownhill. Dawn, just before the break, you shared with us that you had a very scary experience, and you were telling us about this dark presence. Why don't you go on from there?
It was terrifying, but I could, for the first time, label it as being from Satan, if not him himself. Okay. And I knew that I wouldn't be able to fight him myself. Yes. And I still didn't really believe that God existed, but I was sure hoping by now, and I started to call out, I don't know if it was out loud or in my mind, God help me, please help me. Yes. And I really needed him. And it seemed like it was almost going to be too late, that he wasn't going to answer, he wasn't there. And this bright light came out over one side of my bed and did battle with the dark. And the light went bigger or smaller depending on how it was going. And
so you could see this bright light?
Yes. And I actually felt the wind coming off the battle, these two things on the bottom of my bed. Fascinating. And so the light went bigger and smaller, and I was, of course, you know, my hope was in the light. And then at one stage it seemed like the dark was going to squash the light out altogether. Amazing. But then the light just pushed back and the whole room exploded with light. And then I woke up.
Yeah, what a relief to have the light win in this battle. It's an amazing experience, Dawn. So after this, you had this traumatic experience, what happened next?
Well, I went to sleep again, woke up in the morning, and I thought, my, that was a weird dream. But then I started to notice other things, like I just felt really peaceful. I'd look outside and the sun seemed pure and shining down. The grass and the flowers were vibrant and alive. And I just had the sense that I'd been down in the bottom of a deep, dark ocean, cold, alone, squashed, distorted. And now I'd bobbed up into the surface, and I was just basking in the sunshine of God's love and approval. I felt like his child. I felt free and new and light. And it was just so lovely, you know.
It's a special, powerful experience. So Dawn, this is a very dramatic point in your journey. So how did your life change after that confrontation between light and darkness?
Well, I'd finally realised that. It took me about 2 weeks to realise that, you know, this was my conversion experience. Yes. And the Christian lecturer said, "Welcome to the family." And so I started.
So you shared it with him, did you?
I eventually shared it with him after, because I thought I was actually, you know, losing my mind for a while there. Yes. And I thought, no one's going to believe me on this one. Yes. And but I'd realised I'd made that choice between whose side I wanted to be on, and chosen God. And I thought I wanted to find out more about God and Jesus. And none of my university friends were very helpful on the topic. So I thought, church, that's where I should be. So I went off to the church that the lecturer went to, but he wasn't there that day. And I walked in and sneaked in up the back in my mini skirt and sat down, and this dear little old lady sat next to me, and she put her soft, warm hands on mine, and she just stayed with me through the whole of the time that I was there at the church service, and actually gave me her Bible study guide for the next 3 months as well. And just even in the sermon, the preaching, all checked out and made sense, and there were no stretches of the imagination or juggling to accept what the man had said, no leaps in faith, accept this or you're going to be damned, you know.
For sure.
And I loved the singing, and I just felt like I'd come home, like I'd found a new family.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's the evidence of the new birth and of conversion. So Dawn, that was a powerful, miraculous event in your life. Have you continued to see God's miraculous leading in your life?
Yes. I had this strong urge to help people in a more direct way, so I went nursing, and I married my husband, who was going to become a pastor. So we've been married now for 30 years.
So sorry, if I can go back, this church you went to, what denomination was that?
That was the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
So it was an Adventist church?
It was actually an Adventist church.
Okay,
so my husband and I have been married for 30 years. We've worked all over Australia. We've been missionaries in the South Pacific Islands for 6 years as well, and had many different experiences. God worked in amazing ways there to provide for our safety, to rescue us from overturned cars and flooded rivers, and God accepted me, and I found that He didn't leave me, and even the fact that I'm here able to talk today when I used to be so shy and scared and fearful is a sign of God's amazing grace and working in my life.
No, that's wonderful, Dawn. And you and your husband have made a major contribution to the work of ministry in the Adventist Church. Sometimes, people paint a picture, once you've said yes to God and yes to Jesus, that life is essentially perfect. Do you still have any struggles at all?
Oh, definitely. There was a honeymoon experience for about 3 months, and then it was down to work. Even while I was buying my first Bible, my house got burgled. And it actually didn't worry me much. I thought, well, you get that, in this battle between good and evil, stuff like that will happen. I've had health problems and surgery, times of real pain and aloneness, and I found that even though at times God didn't seem to be there, after the storm had passed, He was still there, and I knew He'd been with me all along. Life has had some rough spots, but it's never been as desolate as before. I've never felt as alone as I did before.
You've certainly gone from the bottom of the ocean the picture you painted before. So Dawn, your Christian experience, how has this changed your relationship to others?
The experiences I've been through have actually given me a lot of insight into what's happening with other people. I can relate to them now. Sure. I know that I needed forgiveness. It's made me a lot less judgmental on other people. I feel I can accept them more where they're at and help them and encourage them in their own crises. And through God's word and through God, the world makes so much more sense now. There's still many scary things that happen, but God has plans and God's in control. And I know that whatever happens, God loves me, that He's powerful and that He's good. Before I was in search of the miraculous, but the miraculous found me.
Yes, wonderful. Any final comments? We've only got just a few seconds left. Any final thoughts at all?
Sometimes people get preconceived ideas about a denomination or a path, and I certainly had that. And I'd dismissed Christianity just on what I'd seen in some people. And I just say, taste and see the Lord is good.
Yes. Well, Dawn, thank you very much for your openness and your willingness to share this very thoughtful journey you've been on, and may the Lord continue to bless. And I'm sure that you've enjoyed listening to Dawn's story, and we want to thank her for being here today. And we look forward to seeing you next time on Amazing Stories of God's Amazing Grace.